Braincast, der Schulfunk zum Gehirn.
Another line I don't really understand is, where is it between behavioral economics and neuroeconomics? And you look in the minds of people, but there are no brains in behavioral economics, or no huge expensive hardware.
Yeah.
Isn't it tricky? You just have clever ideas about clever questions to ask?
Neuroeconomics is basically, I think, limited to using expensive neuroimaging technique to look at the same questions. And so far it's been a really interesting field, but its contribution to our understanding of economics or psychology has been a little more limited than you would hope, like compared to how much money we're spending on it. But it's early days, and it's good to start doing it just to see how things are moving. But it's basically just describing things on another level of analysis, right? So, psychology often kind of is about people's general behavior. Behavioral economics care more about what people do when the incentives are set up in certain ways. Like, they rely less on what people say they will do and more about what they were doing. Neuroeconomics tries to look at the brain mechanism that underlie those behaviors. Now, it will never substitute behavior, because economics and behavioral economics are based on what people actually do, but it tries to create a layer of explaining some of those behaviors. And the question is, what level are you comfortable with an explanation? And I think that there probably will be a day when neuroeconomics will be a really important contributor to the field. But right now, it's very hard to think about questions we had about how people make decisions that were answered by neuroeconomics. It gives some support to some things, but it hasn't really kind of solved big problems. It provided new insights, but hasn't really created lots of breakthrough. Not yet. Hopefully one day. Neuroscience is very coarse these days. If you think about something like fMRI, it's like 1 square millimeter of brain. It's a lot of space, 1 square millimeter, right? So we need to wait until the technology gets much better, probably.
You have neurons in doves that decide that stop ticking when the firing rate slows down under the firing rate of another neuron, and the dove decides not to wait any longer and take a smaller incentive.
Some of the interesting work has come from single-cell recording, as you describe, and thinking about single cells as kind of decision makers in economics. But this I think is a field where it's not as clear how single cells aggregate to behavior, which is what economics is interested in. But this is actually something that economics has actually been useful for neuroscience, where you take the theories from economics about competition and signal and so on, and you look at how the neurons behave. So there actually has been some input from economics into neuroscience that I think has been helpful.
You talk a lot about emotion in your new book. Isn't there a connection between those neuroscientists who never talked about emotion 20 years ago, before Damasio and Ledoux came, and now have a completely different view about the human nature being driven by emotion and not just by ratio? Isn't there a parallel? Did you read all those Damasios and Ledouxs?
Yeah, of course. I haven't thought about have they caused this stir for us as well, but I think it's highly possible. I mean, I didn't think about what's the evolution of our interest in emotion, but it's clear it's been on the rise in the last few years. So, and I'm sure Damasio has contributed a lot to it. I'm wondering, it's hard to do the experiment in your mind about what would happen if Damasio wouldn't have published his work, and how interested would we be in emotion, what other things would have caused us to start focusing
I didn't mean it to be causal, but it's a parallel I see.
Yeah, no, and I agree. There's definitely a revival of being interested in emotions, and it could be that part of it comes from neuroscience, because one of the things that neuroscience have done is to show us that there really are these different systems, that there is some sense in talking about emotion as being separate from cognition in some important ways. Part of it are the results, in which it show that sometimes emotion help and sometimes they hurt making decisions, especially financial decision. There's also all this work that comes more from persuasion and advertising. Mm-hmm. They talk about the importance of emotion. So I think there's been kind of a conglomerate of forces that are pointing more and more to the importance of emotions. And that, I think, is now making its way toward economics as well.
Let's bring it all together with the evolution and advertising and economics with the market of love you write about in your book. This is a little strange for an economist to write about love. It wouldn't have been thinkable 10 years ago, would it?
Well, Becker has a theory of marriage. But in Becker's world, it's just about unit of production, right? So it's kind of an interesting contrast, right? For Becker, you can talk about marriage as two people get together to make it more efficient to produce. All of a sudden, you don't need 2 households and 2 kitchens. You can allocate tasks. So you can think about people getting together as an efficient factory in some sense. That's part of the theory of what marriage is about in style economics. I've looked at a few things in love, and I do think it's an important thing. For one, I think it's a really important market. I don't know how it is here in Germany, but in the US, I would think that the singles market is one of the least efficient markets from all the possible markets, with perhaps the exception of the financial market these days. But here's what happens in the US. People go to high school. Then they move to a different state for undergrad. Then they move for a different state for the first job. Then 2 or 3 years, they move again to a different state. What's the chance they'll meet somebody that they like? Every time that they just meet somebody, it's time to go and move somewhere else. On top of that, people work long hours. So when are you going to meet somebody? It's very hard to date somebody that you work with in the same workplace. People don't look kindly on it. And some of my professors' friends were really kind of stuck in this situation. Imagine you're a new faculty, you're working very hard, all the people around you are either other faculty, which is not that exciting, or students, which are out of consideration. You're really stuck, right? So, so because of that, the need for new market mechanisms are really important. And again, it's kind of interesting. In every other aspect of life, we move toward markets. Financial markets become consolidated. Supermarkets become consolidated. Shopping centers. I mean, lots of things become consolidating markets. In the love market, what happened? There's no yente. Parents don't tell their kids what to do. It all becomes decentralized. All of a sudden, you have to do on your own what you should find. It's kind of interesting, right? Should we let people find love on their own? Are we good at this? And are the conditions right for it? And I think they're not. So what do we have in the US and here too? Online dating. Yeah. Right? And online dating is supposed to be a market to get people to meet each other. And the question is this a good market? And the answer is that it's a really important market, central, could be useful, but it's a really badly designed market. Okay. And here's the experiment I want you to do as a thought experiment. Imagine I asked you to give me a list of 100 people. 50 people you really like, and 50 people you don't like so much. And I said, give me the names of those people, and I'll go to all of them, and I'll ask them all to describe themselves based on some online dating website to fill the profile, but without their picture and without their name. And now I come back to you with 100 profiles from an online dating site, and I say, please sort them into 2 piles. The people you like and the people you don't like. What do you think would happen?
I guess I wouldn't even realize who is who.
You wouldn't realize who is who, but you would not be able to predict who you like and who you don't like. Because what happened is that the way we describe people and the way in online dating sites and the way we consume people are very different. Online dating sites take people and try to break them into attributes like cameras. What's the F ratio and the type of lens and how many megapixels and so on. But when you meet somebody for a coffee or when you talk to them, it's not about those characteristics. I mean, some things are important. You might care if they're smokers or non-smoker and how old they are and there's some. But the experience we have with a person that tells us whether we want to spend many hours with them, doing all kinds of things with them, are not about those characteristics. People are much more like wine. When you taste wine, you know what it's like, you know if you like it or don't like it. But if I gave you a list of wines with descriptions, it will be very hard for you to say what it would look like to taste, what it would feel like to taste this wine and how much you would enjoy it.
Unless I'm a connoisseur, and then I wouldn't need a market.
It turns out that even for connoisseurs, it's very hard. Is there an expression in German? In Yiddish, there's this expression Feinschmecker. It's a German expression? Yeah. So we did a study with Feinschmeckers on wine. We went to a wine store that had all these people that thought that they knew how to taste wines. And we tried, how good were they? So in one experiment, we gave them 5 wines, and they described each of them on a piece of paper. They wrote down the description. Then we mixed it, we gave it to new people. We said, try and match it. Nobody could. Okay. We mixed it again, we gave it back to the same people who wrote the description. Even they couldn't do it. It turns out that when you drink wine, you can have a feeling of what it is, but it's really hard to describe it. And there are few people in the world who can do it, but that's it. Now, going back to online dating. Online dating is just a badly designed market. Right? It takes people and it describes them in a way that is easy for computers to describe people, but not in an easy way that is good for people to understand what those people are. And by the way, I think the lessons we've learned from that is not just about online dating. It's about lots of stuff. Think about something like insurance. You have car insurance. Your car insurance is described by the easy things for insurance company to describe the insurance. How much deductible do you have, and what's your limit, and how much uninsured motorist you have. You have no idea how much it's really reducing your risk. I mean, that's what you really care about. Or think about something like your computer. You know how much RAM it has, and about what the bus size, speed is, and what's the refresh rate. I mean, there's all these characteristics. But that's not what you